Do you want to hear my theory on why the government is trying to ban TikTok in the name of national security? Hi, I'm Melissa Watley. I'm a tax attorney and I fight the federal government all day, and I know they love to abuse their power. But before I was a tax attorney, I studied international affairs and actually casually won an award in national security law while I was in law school. And the paper that I won this award was written on Edward Snowden and the Snowden disclosures. And basically it talked about the government's need for national security and how we have to balance civil liberties and civil rights in the balance of national security, and how sometimes the government frames things as national security, but we have to be willing to give up some of our rights, such as free speech or our privacy. So why are all these things related? Let me just read you a little bit about the Edward Snowden disclosures. Let me tell you a little tale of privacy. So on June 3rd, The Guardian, a British newspaper, published classified information from the National Security Administration, aka the NSA, regarding their dragnet surveillance operations taking place domestically and abroad. The following day, the Washington Post published details of PRISM, an internet surveillance program that allowed the NSA to directly access the systems of 9 internet companies, including Google, Facebook, and Apple. I wonder if the government can do that with TikTok. Oh no, I think that's what they want to be able to do with TikTok. So basically what happened was Edward Snowden was an NSA contractor, and he started releasing thousands of classified documents to various media outlets. And he said his sole intention for doing this was to inform the public what was being done against them and what was being done in their name, aka national security, to protect them. So if you don't remember, after 9/11, the government took a lot of swift actions to pass a bunch of laws to combat terrorism and in the name of national security. And in doing so, we gave up a lot of our civil liberties. You know, all that stuff at the airport, a lot of wiretapping, FISA, there was the Patriot Act. So there was a lot of laws passed in order to, national security and to fight terrorism. Now, some of those I'm all down for, right? And we would all be down for. But what people have to realize is when you're trying to balance national security interests, there will be a loss in some civil liberties. And the thing that people don't realize is once the government takes away your rights, they never give them back freely, ever. So I want to read you something from my paper. The issue of how to balance national security interests and civil liberties in light of technological advances is not a novel question. It's a question that courts, politicians, governments, and citizens have struggled with for decades. In fact, Justice Louis Brandeis addressed this very issue in the Supreme Court in 1928. So in his opinion, in Olmstead versus U.S., Olmstead was a bootlegger and his phone was wiretapped by federal agents. A majority of the court found that wiretapping was not an unreasonable search and seizure within the meaning of the Fourth Amendment because the evidence was a conversation and no entry was actually made into his home. Here's the full quote, but most important part. Discovery and invention have made it possible for the government by means far more effective than stretching upon the rack to obtain disclosure in court of what is whispered in the closet. So in thinking about that, if the government has direct access to the data that they wish, right, that they already have to our U.S. American-based social media companies, I'm sure they would love that same access to TikTok, because we do know that the federal government spies on us, our phones, using the social media platforms, and has been known to influence those social media platforms or to reach out to those social media platforms to try to curb certain types of content or promote certain types of content. So I'm sure they would like control and access over the same means of communication that they have with the American companies as they would like over TikTok. Now, the other thing is, I think that TikTok is different than all the other applications, right? Because it does allow us to communicate freely. There's an exchange of ideas, and the content and the algorithm are very effective at putting the right videos in front of the right person. And it really is creating a sense of community. And could this be dangerous to the government? Yes. I mean, could China definitely alter the algorithm to change Americans' opinions? They could, but nobody does that better than U.S. politicians and institutions themselves. So I think the most dangerous thing with TikTok to those in power versus those that don't, the federal government and those that run it, is the lack of ability to control the narrative, right? So there used to only be a few channels, a few newspapers, and we all got our information from the same sources. And so there was a lot of bias and propaganda written, and there's a lot of media bias. And when I was in law school and in undergrad, we studied media bias, how to tell if something's biased or not, what's fact versus opinion. How things are written in a certain way, using certain words can create certain connotations or lead people to think a certain thing or leave out some facts.